So the best way to approach trafficking is to look at it as a business. It's a trade. It's a trade. It's a movement of goods, which are people. You know, Vietnamese people, we have this like phật chịu khó, you know, you have to like suffer for your family. It's part of the
sacrifice,
you know, and it's just not just having female representation. We need to start talking about this openly. Having open, constant discussions about the value of women and girls in Vietnam.
Hi there, this is Mentam, your host on Vietnam Rising podcast. How are you doing today? It has been a quiet ride for me and the team to able to talk and discuss with experts and people in Vietnam who are contributing and improving in Vietnam in their own way. Today's guest is also someone who are working extensively to improve an important part in Vietnam, human trafficking preventions. She is Mimi Vu, the partner at Race Partner, who has been working in NGO social enterprise for more than 20 years. She's been back in Vietnam for more than 13 years and is one of the most well-known independent experts on human trafficking in Vietnam. She is going to enlighten us on the state of human trafficking in Vietnam, how it is a business itself, the root cause of it, and how do we as individual or society can contribute to prevent this ongoing crime. Now, let's go to the episode. Could you tell me about Race Partners as well as your current work as the independent expert for human trafficking?
So Raise Partners is a joint venture between myself, Van Ly, who's my business partner here in Vietnam, and a group of professionals, NGO consulting professionals based out of the UK. And so Van and I have been in Vietnam I've been here for 14 years. She's been here for almost 13. And we both have very similar backgrounds. We're both Viet Kieu from the Midwest, born and raised over there. Both have master's degrees in international development. Both came to Vietnam around the same time. Both worked for NGOs the whole time.
Did you guys meet each other like right when you guys
right when she arrived here? Because she originally started out, I met Van because she was a volunteer at East Meets West Foundation, where I used to work.
Yeah.
And then when I left, she took over my position.
So
when I left East Meets West to move on to Vienna Capital Foundation, she took over. And so from then, we just had a very parallel career and it's always been Mimi and Van, as like the Viet Kieu females in NGO work here.
Yeah.
Other people have gone back home.
I mean, 13 years and 14 years.
Yeah, it's a long time. And so we've always talked about doing something together, half seriously. We joked about it, but it started becoming a little bit more serious. The conversations about a year and a half ago. I was working for an anti-trafficking NGO called Pacific Links Foundation, and Van was working. This is her like foray into the corporate world. She's working for KPMG, and we both were at a point in our careers where we had a very strong network, very strong reputation, lots of experience and knowledge in development in Vietnam and all different sectors. So whether it's health, water and sanitation, gender issues, education, economic empowerment, et cetera, we've done it all. And we thought, okay, actually we want to be able to work on different projects, not the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
And also our value add isn't necessarily anymore in direct implementation, like us actually doing the work, but it's us to kind of give out, present our strategies. It's in our knowledge, it's in our expertise and our ability to work with others to help them gain that same knowledge and strategy and expertise. And I think that's also important for Vietnam. One of the things that we decided when we talked about working together was that we wanted to help train up kind of this next generation of consultants, local Vietnamese, or Vietnamese background consultants who kind of straddle the space between business but also development. That it really doesn't exist here in Vietnam yet.
What's the difference between someone that work directly with NGOs and social enterprise and then someone that's consulting for corporations for that?
Yeah, so this is like a melding of the two. Because for us, even though we worked for NGOs, I we both worked very closely with companies, multinational corporate partners. And so we both understand from the business angle of it as well.
You work on Vina Capital and she worked at
Exactly. And also, I've past donors of mine are some of the biggest companies in the world, like Walmart.
And currently, right now, Race Partner will help the companies?
So now we work with, so basically the goal or the purpose of Race Partners in Vietnam is to work with philanthropists, work with NGOs, work with governments, work with private sector in partnership in order to help them reach their highest social good. So if you are a business and you're like, okay, here's our business plan, but we want to look at how we can create more, build out our strategy to include support for the environment or social issues, because we understand how that links back to strengthening, the consumer base, for example, for our product, but we don't know how to do it. Who do we work with? How do we work with government? How do we work with NGOs? What are the priority, topics or issues for this particular population? Then we would go and that's why you would hire us.
I see. And then do you feel like the culture in Vietnam where, like good karma, you give out, so you gain back karmas and stuff, would that be something partially motivated the companies to do good?
Not necessarily from a business standpoint.
Yeah.
Maybe from an individual standpoint. And also depends
maybe
on
from the owner standpoint, right?
But what we're trying to do is also, we really want to make the point that for companies who invest in, partner with civil society, local NPOs, NGOs, and invest in projects that help strengthen society and environment and reduce the negative effects of all these development issues that Vietnam is going through, it actually helps your business. And so we want more and more companies to embrace that.
You want them to see the long-term visions more than short-term.
There is this feeling or this sentiment among a lot of companies that they will get a bad rap if they say, "Oh, I'm doing this because of business." Right?
Really?
Yeah, and it's very common because it's like, oh, well, they're just doing it because they want to whitewash, or they just tick off the boxes, or they don't really care, or they're selfish. That's why they're doing it for business. They should be doing it for the community. And what we're trying to say is you can do it for all of those things, except for the whitewashing. Make it meaningful, but we want.
But do it because you want to do it, not because of PR.
PR, or not. Embrace the fact that this will help the economy. Embrace the fact that your support for these social environmental projects will not just help the economy, but also help the community. So, for example, so you have a consumer product company. Say, I want to sell, I don't know,
coffee,
but my coffee is geared towards like middle class, right? It's not the most expensive coffee. It's not like the cheapest coffee. It's like middle class coffee, right? Your middle class, you always want to grow your consumer base.
Yes.
Right? And how do you grow your consumer base?
I do a lot of marketing. I do a lot of campaign.
But that's very short term because eventually you will saturate the market that's in front of your face. Yeah. Right? You want to be able to expand into other areas of Vietnam, not just the city, not just Saigon or Hanoi, right? But in order to do that, in order to take on future customers, they have to be able to afford your middle class priced coffee. Yeah. And in order for middle class to grow, it means that they have to go to school. They have to have job training, good jobs, access to all these opportunities in order for them to be able to someday afford your coffee.
Oh, okay.
Right?
That is much longer than I thought.
It's long, but this is the thing, is that if you're a company investing in Vietnam, aren't you here for the long term?
Yes. For like, at least, I hope my business will stay here for at least 20 to 50 years.
Yeah, so I don't really understand. I've never come across a company before that says, I'm only going to invest in Vietnam for like 2 years. Yeah. It doesn't make any sense. So you have to look at, what is the long-term strategy. And yes, you may not see the result in 3 years or 5 years.
But how do you measure the effect of that? For example, if you're saying that if I'm trying, I try to build, I try to make as a business, like coffee business, I try to help people go to school. How do I measure that will, affect my business as a whole?
Well, so there's a couple ways of measuring and different areas of measurement. So number one is working with the NGOs, and the NGOs will often take care of this, is measuring how many kids stay in school. Part of the process of working closely with the NGOs is making sure, and this is completely, totally more than okay, and I encourage this, is making sure that the brand recognition of the company is really strong when it comes to the population that you're working with. So that as these kids go to school and grow up, they recognize
by coffee or
the whatever coffee company becomes a part of their life. And it takes on more meaning than just, it's a coffee company. It's a coffee company that has provided all of this stuff, has helped my community go to school and do this. And it's also, so all that is also building brand loyalty.
Okay. Yeah, that's true.
And it's helping the community. So this segmentation, this division between, it's only business or it's only, for good, for charity, that's so old school, and it's not what Vietnam needs anymore.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Can you tell me more about your work as the expert in the human trafficking issue?
So I have always worked. So when I first moved to Vietnam 14 years ago, I worked for an NGO called East Meets West Foundation, which back then did kind of comprehensive development of Vietnam. So everything: education, water and sanitation, hygiene, gender, infrastructure. So everything was intersectional. So you always had to consider, okay, if you have a program about health, how does gender, education, lack of education, and poverty affect someone's health? So we always had to think about that. So that's how I've always done development, is look at what are the influencing factors that create these development issues that Vietnam is facing.
Yeah.
And after East Meets West, I moved on to Vienna Capital Foundation. So I was development director there for about 5 years. And after I left them, I wanted to take a break and just work as a consultant.
Yeah.
But very soon after that, I started working for an American NGO called Pacific Links Foundation, which at the time was a small organization. I think it was, I'm not sure how many employees, maybe 8 employees.
Oh, wow.
And
is that like across Southeast Asia? Or is it mainly?
It's only in Vietnam.
Okay.
Headquarters is in California. There's only 2 people out in California, and then everyone else is in Vietnam. And they had like 3 projects, I think. And so I thought, okay, this is like a nice program I can contribute to and still be able to do consulting on the side. But very quickly, it went to basically being the main issue that I worked on. Number one, because there was a lot of room for me to be able to do things in that space. And number 2, not a lot of organizations, or it wasn't a huge topic at the time in Vietnam or globally.
Yeah.
This was back in 2013. We knew of the trafficking of women and girls to China.
Yeah.
A little bit to Cambodia. This was right around when trafficking to Malaysia started increasing. But it was more about, the news was about rescuing girls, rescue this.
Yeah.
Not much was being talked about in terms of prevention. Because when you talk about prevention, you have to look at what are the root causes of why, what are the push factors of why Vietnamese women and girls keep getting sold abroad.
Yeah.
And what are the pull factors as well? And at that time also there was almost no discussion about the trafficking of Vietnamese people to Europe. And so
how do the victims, they got into the system? Are they getting tricked, or they are voluntary participated on it, or some kind of influence on them?
No, so it depends on what destination market you're looking at, and also what victim profile you're looking at. So the best way to approach trafficking is to look at it as a business. It's a trade. It's a movement of goods, which are people, across borders from a source country to a destination market. And there's different reasons for buying them.
Yeah.
And so they are marketed differently, and the methods in which you procure your product or your people are different depending on who's buying.
Okay.
So the North, when you talk about victims from the North going over into China, they're majority ethnic minorities because they live at that border region between Vietnam and China. And also,
do they get sold as like their family sold them, or they get kidnapped?
It depends. It depends. Up there, it's a very mixed bag because it's very opportunistic. So whatever you can use at that moment to get a victim, you use it.
Wow.
Right. So it could be your, your school classmate whose parents say, we, and this is a true story, actually, our farming equipment broke down. We need money. So we heard that we can sell some girls into China.
And the parents would actually do that?
So go get your, try and get your classmates.
Oh. Whoa.
And so
that's messed up.
They're like, these girls are like 14 years old. And so they trick their friends, their classmates.
Because they are, the parents say that's okay.
We need farming equipment. Whatever, the plow broke down, whatever it is that they need.
Yeah.
And so the classmate will say, hey, why don't you, my family's taking me to a Hmong festival that's right over the border, because the Hmong community straddles the border. So you have Hmong Vietnamese, Hmong Chinese, they're the same.
Yeah.
Right? Hmong. So they're like, you just go and it's your friend. You trust them. And then right when you get to the border, which they often don't know that they're at the border, then they are passed on to the traffickers on the Chinese side, the buyers on the Chinese side. And then the people on the Vietnam side get their money and they go back home. Or you have uncles selling his own sisters and nieces, saying, okay, it's that time again for the, whatever Hmong event that I take you to every single year.
But
let's go,
every single year,
sister. And
he take one sister.
No.
Okay.
No, it's normal, but we had a gambling debt or something, right? It's very opportunistic.
But no, I'm saying that if that uncle and he has in his family 2 or 3 sisters.
No, he takes them all at once.
Oh.
It's not like because every year they go and they trust him because he's their uncle.
Oh, okay.
So every year I take you to the same festival. So what's different this year? Nothing. And then you go.
Wow. How do you?
There's outright kidnapping.
Yeah.
And now the biggest or the fastest growing way of procuring victims or product is actually Facebook Messenger. So what the agents in China will do is that they will hire young men, Vietnamese or Chinese young men, to go onto Facebook and friend as many Vietnamese girls as possible. This is interesting. This is a very interesting case because it's very much it's like the crash of globalization and technology.
Not in the best way.
And gender issues and everything. So imagine if you are a 14-year-old Hmong girl living in some village in Lao Cai. You've never been outside of your village. Your parents are illiterate. But everyone has a smartphone. Everyone has a smartphone, and data is cheap, right? So your parents can't read.
Yeah.
You're on Facebook. Everyone's on Facebook. So all of these young women and girls who have never left their village all have 5,000 friends on Facebook because they literally accept everyone that asks them. And so these young men who have been hired by traffickers and smugglers will start relationships with these young girls on Facebook and become a couple on Facebook Messenger, and oftentimes get engaged on Facebook Messenger. And this takes like 1 or 2 months. And then it comes from the time that then they're like, okay, let's meet. I can't wait to show you to my parents and all that stuff. And this is like online predators. It happens in the US. It happens all over the world.
I was the generations of internet, and I do experience that, right?
Yeah.
I remember around 12 and 14. If my mom listening to this, she's probably freaking out right now. So I would actually go on like online forum, talk to people, and I do kind of like dating online out there too. But I guess, there's one incident actually where this boyfriend of mine, who is, mind you, who was 26 years old. and I was 14.
Oh,
no, I was
gosh.
13, right? And well, for me at the time, I didn't, recognize as normal. I'm just like, oh, he's older. And then we were like chatting stuff, and then we're like boyfriend and girlfriend for like a month or two.
He was twice your age?
Yes.
Okay.
And then he was like, hey, do you want to meet? And I was almost going to meet him. But then for some reasons, I just feel a hunch of like, no, I shouldn't do that. And then I just cut him away. But
I mean, you could have gotten into big trouble.
Yeah, I think so.
big trouble, because actually one of the growing target groups of trafficking victims in Vietnam are high school and college students.
Yeah.
Again, the girls, there's also this external societal pressure to get married as well, right? So it's from that age on, you're thinking about it.
And then you also want love.
Exactly.
If your family's not happy. And
exactly.
everything.
And especially with the ethnic minority communities, people, girls tend to get married much younger.
Oh, yeah.
Much younger age. And so the pressure to meet, their boyfriend, husband, fiance, whatever, is much greater. And they're poor. And so it's a way out of their current circumstances.
And then their family encouraged them to get a rich husband or something like that.
Or not. The parents often don't know what's going on because they're out working in the fields, and they're illiterate. Most of them can't read. And so they don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
We had one case, his mother is amazing. She, her daughter, all that, was groomed, got engaged on Facebook. And then when she was 14, and then met up with her quote unquote fiance, and brought her best friend, the neighbor girl. And then the two young men got them drunk and then took them over the border to China and then sold them to a middleman and on and on. One of the girls managed to call one of her sisters, and tell her what happened. And then the sister then told the mom, but the mom didn't know what happened. But she says she remembers a blue square on her phone and that the daughter was playing with it all the time, which is Facebook. So she went in on Facebook and found the picture. She'd also seen a picture of this guy.
Yeah.
Found the picture, but couldn't read any of it. Took it to the neighbors, was like, read this for me. What does it say? She found out everything. And then she took the phone to a print shop, printed out the pictures, put them up all over town, went to the police station, said this guy kidnapped my daughter, everything. And then she was like, where did they go? And, police were like, they went here. And so she took a bus to the town, his town. He had sent the daughter some pictures of his house. And so she walked around the village trying to match up the windows and the roof and everything with the pictures in the house. Finally found the house, knocked on the door, and the guy's parents opened the door. And she's like, where's your son? He kidnapped my daughter. He sold my daughter to China. And the parents were like, no, he would never do that. He would never do that. He's just out. So the mom, and she's amazing when she tells the story. She's like one of my favorite people in the world. She has a machete. So she took out her machete. Machete, like her huge knife.
Oh, wow.
And basically held it up to their throats and said, if you don't tell me where your son is, I will find him and I will slit his throat. And I will come back and I will slit your throats.
Damn.
So that's
but then, yeah, I would think, yeah. I would do the same.
She's
if
like
that's
4
my daughter.
foot, 8 feet. I mean, she's tiny, right? And
but that's the power of the parent, right?
Oh yeah. She's she's got like 10 kids, single mom, grandmother at age 35. Her husband died of alcoholism years ago, so she's a very, very strong woman. And so then she went and actually went to the border gate to try and cross over into China to find her daughter. And meanwhile, her daughter was being transferred to two men who were buying her. And she started screaming and crying in the street. And luckily, a Vietnamese woman who had been trafficked and sold 20 years earlier, but she stayed married with her husband because she said he was actually a very kind man, and she was too ashamed to go back to Vietnam. She heard the girl crying in Vietnamese and stopped and then talked to her and then realized what was going on. So she, went up to the two men, this woman, and said, you have just bought a stolen girl. You can't do this, all this stuff. I'm taking her with me. And then, so that was at the point where the mom caught up with this other woman and the daughter.
This is happening within days?
This is happening within about like 4 or 5 days.
Wow.
And then they were like, we can't leave until we get the best friend back too. And so mom went her machete going like, so where's the other girl? And they were able to get the other girl back. Yeah.
Damn. That's really lucky though. Because there are people that like, went missing for like 20, 30 years.
Yeah, but it's also because they also make this decision to stay there because they don't want to deal with the stigma going back to Vietnam. One of the things also, I bring this all back to the fact that this is a business and it's a trade and it's all commodity based.
Yeah,
is that many of these young men when and this is documented with the Lao Cai Bureau of Vices Prevention. It used to be called DSEP, which is Department of Social Evils Prevention, but now has a new name. When iPhone, Samsung, whenever a new phone is released, they always notice a rise in trafficking victims or girls going missing across the border
from Vietnam launching
because, and this is from also they know from interviews with young men who've been arrested for trafficking. And they ask them, why did you do this? Why did you sell these girls? And they're like, because I wanted the new iPhone.
Wow. Okay.
So it's all, you have to think about this in terms of business and commodity.
How does a person, wrap it out their head about, this is a commodity. I'm just going to do that so I can trade for a phone. That means they don't look at those girls or those women as people anymore.
No, and but that's what slavery and trafficking is. It's the dehumanization of people. You are not human, not because whoever's looking at you wants a product, but because of whatever society's judgments are. You're female, you're ethnic minority, you're poor, so you are lower than me or whoever it is that's doing the selling, and therefore you are I only value you as a product of what I can get out of you or exploit you for. Wow. It's slavery. It's what happened to Africans who were enslaved and brought to the U.S. Yeah, it's why you have the Black Lives Matter movement. Now, Black Lives Matter means value us as humans, just like white people, just like any other, and that's what it is. It's the Black Lives Matter movement in the U.S. is a culmination of hundreds of years of dehumanization of Black people in America. And even though we've had all these Civil Rights Act, all that stuff, it's still pervasive because it's not about laws. It's about actual sentiment in society. It's our values. It's like our people's perception, your perception, all of that.
It's like stereotype and everything.
Exactly. And so that is slavery. Slavery all over the world is like that. So when you look at slavery and trafficking of Vietnamese women and girls to China, for example, it's because China needs women and girls to be mostly brides and wives because and this goes back to Confucianism. We're all East Asians, so we follow Confucius rules, gender inequity, because of China's one-child policy, but also the belief of valuing boys over girls. Yeah, it created one of the side effects of the one-child policy for China is 40 years almost. Is they created one of the largest gender imbalances in the world. So China right now is missing anywhere between 40 to 60 million women of what we call marriageable age. Yeah. And so that's the same amount of men of marriageable age who do not have wives because there simply is no supply. Yeah. That's why they take from other countries like Vietnam.
But then those men who are unable to find wives, they are fully knowing that they are participating in this system.
Because they view women as
a commodity.
It's something I need in order to continue my bloodline and, whatever. I need a wife because society says I need a wife, whatever the reasons are. Yeah. But because women and girls were devalued before, it led to the gender imbalance. Yes. And now but it still hasn't changed. That belief that men are better than women still is very pervasive all over the world. Yeah, we're talking about Asia now. So and so their view of women and girls is as a necessity, as a product, rather than I need to find like my soulmate or my equal partner. That does not come into play.
Do there are also a lot of cases in Vietnam where a lot of Vietnamese wife are, married to Taiwanese husband or Korean husband, and then they also got beaten up or killed, everything. And so I actually researched before this episode, and I remember they said that it's all legal, but from a human trafficking point, then it's still human trafficking.
Yeah, because it's an interesting one. I was in South Korea, a couple of years ago, meeting with NGOs and shelters out in Korea, in Seoul, to talk about this issue, because there's so many Vietnamese women who marry abroad. I think as of right now, we are the top number 1 or number 2 source of foreign brides in South Korea and in Taiwan. Philippines is the other one. It's from a official standpoint, it's legal because you have that legal marriage document.
Yeah.
However, and this is, the Women's Rights Commission of Korea states that they view these particular cases as human trafficking because the women who married the Korean men or Taiwanese men or whatever, and their families were tricked, because oftentimes the men promise, I'll give you, I'll build you a new house. I'll send you $500 every month, all that stuff. I'll treat your daughter properly. It's under false pretenses.
Yeah.
So they were tricked, essentially.
Yeah.
But
so it's like a toxic relationship, but then much worse.
The legal implications are that it's a legal marriage. So that's why from a legal standpoint, it's not considered human trafficking. But from a development, from a human rights standpoint, we all consider it human trafficking because they were tricked into this situation where they were exploited, abused, killed, murdered. And there's very little recourse for them because their immigration status is often tied to their marital status. And so and they don't speak the language. They're abused by the extended family, by the mother-in-law, by the sister-in-law, all of that stuff. And they can't come back to Vietnam because they don't want to shame their families. For trafficking of Vietnamese women and girls into Cambodia is a different matter. That's almost purely for forced prostitution. Oh, okay. Because the market in Cambodia is one of, it's a sex tourism market. And often for pedophiles as well.
Oh, okay.
So you get pedophiles, international and regional, and then you also have this very culturally specific driver, which is pre-Tet, right? Pre-Lunar New Year. There will be men coming from the countries that celebrate Lunar New Year. So China, Vietnam, Singapore, Malaysia, Taiwan will go to Cambodia. And in order to kind of exorcise their remaining bad luck or usher in good luck for the new year, they will want to have sex with a virgin. The more light-skinned, the better.
Really?
The more desirable. And so that's why you have this kind of
so they will
odd situation where Vietnamese get trafficked to a lower developed country or a less developed country in Cambodia. And that's the market there. Most of the victims do come from the Mekong Delta region. And the push factors are often poverty, gender inequity, and so they go look for work in Cambodia.
Yeah.
And the pull factor, and there's a market for all of that. And the age range tends to be much younger than the victims who go to China. Victims who go to China are generally what I would call of childbearing age. 15, 16 to even early 40s. Or if they're younger, they're sold there and then they're forced into they're put into forced labor until they're ready to give birth.
Wow.
Whereas Cambodia, it's much younger, much younger. Maximum age would be like 15.
Wow. And wow. Well, knowing all that, I feel like I'm kind of understand why my moms always have this kind of like
why your parents are always like I have to take care.
So here's the thing, right? As I told you, like I have those kind of experience with brother online. I'm exposed to internet very early, but then my parents, my mom specifically, she's also very try to make me aware of that, right? She always like, until now, she's still like, if you go out late, you will get kidnapped. That's the one thing that she's still trying to tell me, that if you go out after 8, it's dangerous and you will get kidnapped one way or the other. And I always think that it's kind of ridiculous because I've never seen it. But now, knowing the things that you just told me, it makes me feel like, yeah, I'm not sure. I might become a helicopter parent. I gotta worry if I have a daughter.
It is.
Would you be scared too if you have a daughter?
I'd be terrified. It's like for many reasons.
Yeah.
But it is. I don't know how. I have no idea how my parents did it. But I think that's also why they kept us very sheltered. I grew up in a 1,000 person farm town in the US.
Yeah.
And we were cut off from the rest of the world until we went to visit our relatives in France or in Switzerland.
Yeah.
But then it was a very controlled environment. But other than that, it was, we were extremely sheltered and I see why my parents did it. But you also want to make sure that you raise your children to be smart and to make smart decisions and not always shelter them because then they become very naive.
Yeah.
And I see that as well. Some of the trafficking survivors I've worked with, they tend to get, a little bit rebellious, right? If your parents shelter you too much.
Yeah.
And then you see the natural teenage rebellion come out and then they get put in very dangerous situations. So it's always going to be kind of this tension, push-pull balance.
So what would be the skill that you would teach your daughter to make sure that she can help herself? Or
well, the main thing is to be think comprehensively about her decisions. Don't just make snap decisions, but think about the ramifications of it. One of the ways that my parents raised us, and this is, I think, in hindsight, I think it's actually brilliant, but it was very annoying growing up, was that my mom always told us that our ancestors were constantly watching over us to make sure that we didn't do anything to shame them or the family or bring, shame to all Vietnamese people, because apparently we were representing every single Vietnamese person. And so, but what that did was that it made, us kids constantly think about, as our filter, how will this impact mom and dad? How will mom and dad feel if I do this? And it still is something that, it's a benchmark that I use to this day. Like, if not that I do anything crazy, but it's like, is this something that will embarrass my parents? And that's like the low bar. If it's something that would, bring them shame, then that's not something I would ever do or speak or act upon or whatever. So,
yeah. But how about sacrifice? Then would you, because I feel like if that mentality, I agree that, we should be responsible and consequent. We should understand the consequence of all the choice that we make. So we make sure if I have a daughter, I will tell her that, you have a choice of everything that you do, but you have to understand the consequence of that. But and that, I think, including, make your family angry or, not obey them all the time.
It's not about obeying. I think it's more about thinking through rationally and logically. Okay, because your parents can also be irrational.
Yes.
So, but being able to think critically about the situation, I think that's something that's so important to teach your children, is not to just accept. And this is something, when I do like prevention work, and I in speaking to young people who are at risk in the at-risk groups. Encouraging them to think critically about every decision they make or whatever information is being given to them. One of the most annoying things about this trafficking is the situation for Vietnam, is the trafficking of Vietnamese people to Europe. And this is where we stand out. There's no other country in Asia like Vietnam, unfortunately, when it comes to this, because we have, we are number one for child trafficking victims in the UK, number two for adults, and all along the transit countries throughout Eastern and Western Europe. We are number one for irregular migrants who are on their way to the UK. And it's mostly men and boys from just a handful of provinces. And for them, I interview these migrants often, or these victims when they become victims, either in detention centers, either in, they've been convicted of drug cultivation, even though they are victims, or they're in detention centers, or they're in the migrant camps in Europe. And I ask them, why did you go? Why did you decide? You left your family. Your wife is pregnant. Why would you do this? Oh, because người ta nói. I'm like, who is người ta? Oh, like one of my neighbor's cousin's best friend's sister said that I can make, 4,000 pounds a month doing nails. And I just look at them like, and you didn't bother to ask any questions? I'm like, they're like, oh, but, người ta, người quen mà, and I'm like, it's so frustrating because there's no critical thinking there. There's no, it's just
you just believe whatever is presented to you.
Because you want to believe it so badly. Yeah. And the more that they suffer, and I see this all the time, the more that they're put in the detention centers or this and that, the more that they suffer and the more dire their circumstances are, living in like under a tent in the middle of a forest on the French border, the more they cling to this belief that no, the UK is like the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. It is. And nothing I say to them will change their mind. And
then you mentioned there's an incident a few years ago about the 39 people.
Oh, no, this is just October. October.
Last year, is it? October?
Just in October.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, and then you said that because thanks to that, it's now more people are aware of the risks, right?
Yes, they're more aware of the risks. And all of this, everything I'm saying is caveat is COVID, right? So COVID right now has, because the borders are shut, so it's stopped the outflow of Vietnamese going to Europe and the UK. So that is at least one silver lining. I guess
from COVID
is that it stopped, but we still have to worry about the Vietnamese who were already in Russia or Central and Western Europe on their way to the UK. What has happened to them?
Yeah, and because now they cannot go.
They can't go, and they
stuck. Can't come back too.
So just last week there were a group of Vietnamese in Barcelona, irregular migrants, no papers, on their way to the UK, thinking, again, they would do nails. And they were begging on Facebook on all these Vietnamese groups. They were sleeping in the park in Barcelona. They had no money, no paperwork, no nothing, no way to get home. And begging for anyone to help them, some way for them to get back to Vietnam. Or just to have shelter or food. So that is the situation of Vietnamese who were in transit in Europe. And what would be interesting to see, and right now it's difficult because, we can't travel and it's hard to get information out of the Vietnamese, those kinds of Vietnamese migrant groups in Europe. What would be interesting to see is gauging how much do they want to continue on because they are in debt, or do they want to come back to Vietnam?
What choice do they have? Like, if they come back, do they able to pay back the debt?
That's the question I would like to ask them, because number one, the economy for a long time in Europe was shut down, right? So you couldn't do nails, and nails was going to be their big thing.
Yeah.
But all of that was closed. So the economy, especially in the UK, they had social distancing, essential services were locked down. Now it's starting to reopen again, but I imagine there will be another wave of infection because everyone's on vacation and not that many people are wearing masks in Europe based on, photographs I've seen of my friends on vacation in Europe. So the opportunity to make money may not be there for them. Number two is Vietnamese people don't want to get sick.
That's true.
And aside from the second wave, which I think is pretty, you have infections, but it's pretty controlled. We're not on, lockdown. And I think everyone here trusts that the Vietnamese government can handle this.
Yeah.
And we definitely handled it the first time around. Has made basically Vietnam a more desirable destination.
Yeah.
So that they come back because they're like, I don't want to get sick and die because they can't go to the hospitals. They don't have money. And if they do go to the hospitals,
they don't have insurance.
They don't have insurance. And they also might get picked up by the police or immigration.
Yeah.
So it's very, very difficult for the Vietnamese irregular migrants right now. Because it's, again, this tension between making money or trying to make money and also staying safe.
For UK, for boys and men to go there beside nails, what else do they do? Why do they require child labor? Because I'm guessing that the regulations in UK would be more strict on that.
No, it's not. It's not necessarily child labor. So it's this is a testament to Vietnamese entrepreneurship. So one of the things that Vietnamese people do really, really well is they identify
an opportunity,
they scale it up, and then they replicate it all throughout diaspora communities. So take the nail industry.
Yeah,
that started out in California. And actually it was started by Tippi Hedren's American actress who was in Alfred Hitchcock movies. But she wanted to sponsor Vietnamese refugees in California. And as a way to give them jobs, she paid for their training to do nails and then put them to work on her movie sets. And then more and more Vietnamese came in and started doing that. And then eventually they opened up their own salons and their own training schools. And then eventually you see this business model replicated all across
the world.
Yeah. So go to any nail salon in Europe and it is Vietnamese. I know because every time I pass by a nail salon, anywhere I am in Europe, I stop in and it's Vietnamese. So that is kind of the model that Vietnamese people are really good at doing. So in the 1990s, after the Cold War ended and the Berlin Wall fell, you had thousands of Vietnamese people, mostly from Nghệ An, Hải Phòng, Hà Tĩnh. Well, at the time it was like Nghệ Tĩnh, Hanoi, Quang Binh, that central north, who had already gone to the former Soviet bloc countries to either go to school or work as, labor export in factories. And they've created these Vietnamese diaspora communities in Moscow, in Berlin, in Prague, in Warsaw, and started sending money back home. So you have remittance culture, right? Yeah. That's why in Nghệ An you have all these, houses and motorbikes and all that stuff that's all been built by remittance money.
Yeah.
And then, after the Cold War ended, they didn't necessarily want to go back to Vietnam. They needed to continue working and
supporting the
family. But then you already had also these trade routes that were already established between Vietnam and those countries.
Yeah.
You have to get your nước mắm and noodles and all whatever product that you miss from back home.
Yes.
You already had the services that existed to help place Vietnamese in jobs in those countries and arrange for their transportation and paperwork and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Now those services weren't needed anymore. But they still continue to this day as these services that send people to Europe and the UK to do nails.
What do you mean? Like doesn't need anymore?
No, because the labor export program,
Oh,
stopped after.
okay,
War. So
yeah. That's true.
Factory workers.
But then there's still a lot of service out there where they help with visa and everything to go.
No, but this was very specific. It's contracted with by a factory, and you recruit workers. And all of that labor export services, right? And
is that still the same for Japan?
Yeah. So now you see Japan, Taiwan, South Korea. Yes. So Nghệ An still is the top province that supplies most of overseas labor. Yeah. Especially to the other Asian countries. So it actually started out in Prague. So then you had what were also the beginnings of. So you had already Vietnamese diaspora. So the new VITQ communities established, but then you also had the establishment of Vietnamese-led organized crime groups in these cities, Moscow, Berlin, Prague.
Yeah.
So in Prague, that's where you had the start of the cannabis cultivation. So originally it was, I don't know who was cultivating it before. I don't know, like Czech hippies, who knows, right? Whatever. But the Vietnamese there at the time, they saw an opportunity and they're like, okay, we're good at agriculture. And they were able to develop various strains of Vietnamese higher quality cannabis. Develop growing systems, and then create a supply chain for it. First regionally, locally, and then regionally. And then they connected with the other Vietnamese diaspora communities and organized crime groups in all the other areas, and then exported this business model. Right? So it's like the nail thing all over again. Where they get the labor from, and this goes back to this view of this concept of dehumanization, right? And the thing about Vietnamese is we're so good when it comes to, we talked before about getting the discount We're very like, you talk to us in financial terms about money and saving, we get it, right?
Yeah.
And so, but this is that taken to the extreme without considering
human rights.
Not just human rights, just this is humans. Humans, period.
Yeah.
It's not about human rights. It's just about humanity. And I'm sure there's like psychological reasons for that, which whatever. But so Vietnam post collapse of the Soviet Union was still a very poor country, right? This is just very post đời mới, so it was still poor. So people were still wanting to go.
Yes.
But they still viewed that going over to these other countries was going to
change their lives,
and
for
they could send
the
money back
future
home.
Generations.
Exactly. And this goes back to that thing when you're like, what about sacrifice? This whole concept of hising jazaring, right? A sacrifice for the family. And this is a theme that's run all throughout. And sometimes it's really frustrating. And so now these services that existed before to send people over still existed, but it was now underground, right? And the groups that were doing the people now organized crime that was running the cannabis cultivation and all of that, they're also the ones who are involved in, their business. So they do lots of things. Their logistics, their transport, movement of goods. And so they're like, yes, people, coming in and then thinking, how can I increase my profit margin? Well, then, don't have to pay for labor. It's great. Number one, you have people who are actually paying
to get
themselves there. So you don't you're not spending any money to recruit, to house, to do anything. They're paying for it.
Yeah.
You get a cut of it.
Wow.
And then you can enslave them, not having to pay them any labor or any labor
But then
costs.
I thought the original deal was to, those people to go, and then you work for an amount of year to pay off the debt, and then you...
So it depends. So with cannabis cultivation, no, because that's an illegal thing. If you're doing nails, oftentimes it's
then what's the
debt bondage.
So they basically just trick those people to go to the marijuana plant and just not paying anything.
So they'll start off, and it's a whole mixed bag of things. Maybe you'll start off doing nails, but you're under debt bondage. So you have to work 12 hours a day, and you're told that your value, what you would be earning, is only, say, 50 pounds a month. That's so that they can keep you for as long as possible. And so you don't actually get paid 50 pounds a month. They're just saying, okay, every month I deduct 50 pounds, every week I deduct 50 pounds from your total debt. So that right there is debt bondage.
But then how about the living expense? Like, how do you get paid from that?
No, they all live in the same place. They they're all all live in one, one quarter when everything, they're not allowed to talk to anyone. They just go to work, go back home.
Yeah.
And then maybe after a couple of months, the people running this will say, okay, no, you're going to be transferred to Wales or to Ireland. And then they'll be put into a cannabis cultivation house.
Oh, I see.
So it's not like cut and dry.
Even the nail salon,
everything's linked.
They know about this, and they also just
you have legitimate nail salons. You have legitimate nail salons.
Yeah.
And then you have
those kind
ones
of
that are
nail
gray.
salon. Yeah.
Very gray.
I see.
And then you have the ones that are just fronts for like prostitution or whatever.
Yeah.
So there's a whole range of it. But it's essentially free labor. Because they're like, we got to make as much money as possible. And it's, and now what's fascinating and terrifying is that these Vietnamese-led organized crime groups out of Central Europe, the ones who, have started all this, Berlin and Prague, they're now switching to, so they are, they're a business, so they respond to market forces. They're moving away from cannabis cultivation.
And because it's now legal?
No, well, the attitudes are changing. It's becoming legalized. People are becoming more relaxed.
So
about
the margins
are
not as high anymore.
Yeah, and it's just not. Yeah, and also there are other competitors coming in. So they're like, it's too labor intensive. There's too much attention paid to it, and so now they identified crystal meth production.
Oh wow! Okay,
as the next big thing because it's an unsaturated business. It's an unsaturated market. So as far back as 2015, the UNODC, so UN Office of Drugs and Crime, had published a report identifying the rise in crystal meth led by Vietnamese organized crime groups in Prague, in Czech Republic. Already, and this is 5-6 years ago, which means that to be identified as already like the leaders of it means that it's been going on for at least a couple of years back then. When I was doing research on this a couple of years ago, I went to Czech Republic and met with Ministry of Interior, met with the head of anti-trafficking unit, drugs, border guards, criminologists, researchers, and went into the Vietnamese communities and all on the border towns between Czech Republic and Germany. They're controlled by Vietnamese.
Yeah.
And for them, it's such a big business, and they have so quickly found out a way to industrialize their operations, scale up, and now they're distributing and replicating this business model across Europe.
Wow.
So right now, so these statistics were from about 2 years ago. Germany, Czech Republic produced about 10 to 12 tons of crystal meth officially in 2017, and that was coming from the led by Vietnamese organized crime in Prague. About 70% of which was exported to Germany, which is fueling the rise of crystal meth addiction in Germany. And now if you again look at the marijuana, look at the nail salons. What do you think is going to happen?
It's going to happen like that again.
Yeah. And not only that, but it loops back to Vietnam as well, because if you read the news articles.
But I don't get it, because if the victims at the point where they are, transported to you and they are strict or, being in like marijuana plant, then they still not aware that they are a victim?
Sometimes, a lot of times they're not, because, Vietnamese people, we have this like phạt chịu khó, you have to like suffer for your family. It's part of the
sacrification,
and we have a very, very long tradition of just like sacrificing for our family and the country and whatever all else.
Yeah.
And and we have examples of this throughout history.
Yes.
If you look at the boat people situation, the refugee situation from the 1970s to the late 1980s, you had boat people fleeing Vietnam to go over to wherever, Canada, America, Europe, Australia, being taken over by pirates in the sea, lost at sea, living in refugee camps for years, all these terrible, horrible things. But eventually they made it to whatever country, and then money started going back to Vietnam.
Yeah.
And then what they do, and I tell, people in Nghệ An and wherever else it's all the time, I'm like, they save up for 2 years. Their every other year visit back to Vietnam. They save up money and they dress up and they buy all these gifts, and they come back and they act like they're the richest person in the world and life is so wonderful and beautiful. And it's really not, but it's this like, you have to brag, and
it's a status. You obviously already,
and you don't want to.
You have to give stuff. You'll be rich.
Who's going to tell their family? Oh, actually, I have to work 4 jobs. Life is so hard.
But even with the closest members of your family, and they wouldn't just tell.
No, they wouldn't. That's why this trafficking of Vietnamese to Europe has gone on for so long.
Yeah.
Because even the young people, and especially the young people, would never, ever dream of telling their parents what had happened to them, because they don't want their parents to worry. They don't want their parents to suffer. They just want everything to be perfect and wonderful, and everyone to be happy that money is coming back home. I was in Malaysia last year at the invitation of the Malaysian government, because in Malaysia, Vietnamese women we're number 1 for trafficking victims in Malaysia. So 1/3 of all trafficking victims are Vietnamese
ranking
women.
Or like from the worst scale, how big is the Vietnam human trafficking system
to Malaysia?
No, like the war, because right now you're telling me that Europe, Malaysia, and China everywhere is like number 1.
No, I mean, because we can only give the thing about trafficking and smuggling is that it's a shadow trade. You will not have the complete picture of statistics.
Yeah.
So all you can go on is usually when official statistics are when you encounter victims.
Yeah.
Right. And that's just a slice
Of the entire thing.
Yeah. So in your mind, you always have to add to it.
Yeah. Okay,
so
back to Malaysia.
So Malaysia. So we are officially 1/3 of all trafficking victims in Malaysia. We're number 1 for foreign prostitutes in Malaysia. We're number 1 for suspected victims of trafficking in Malaysia. So it's all these issues. And so when I was there, we went to Johor, which is right on the border of Singapore. It's about a 5-hour drive from KL, and the government had asked us to go there because to visit a shelter where the evening before the police had done a raid on a karaoke bar right on the border and picked up 24 Vietnamese girls who were suspected victims of trafficking. So we went and interviewed them, and all from the Mekong Delta. Age was anywhere. I mean, they say they were 18 to, I think the oldest was 28. Some of them looked, it could have been like 15, 16.
Oh, wow.
And, it goes back to your question, like, do they not know that they have been trafficked? These girls had no idea if they were, because they told their families that they were going to Malaysia to go work. Because all the factories in Malaysia often hire Vietnamese workers. And so there's a whole market now for Vietnamese workers from the Mekong Delta to go work in factories in Malaysia.
Yeah.
Plus with cheap airfare and stuff. That's why Malaysia is now a top destination for Vietnamese trafficking victims. And so these girls told their families that they were going to Vietnam or to Malaysia to go work mainly in factories. But once they got to Malaysia, they were told, oh, no, you'll make more money working what is it to open up the beer cans? The like
yeah.
And I was like, okay, so so I was like, well, how much money do you make? They're like, oh, well, each month we make $400. I'm like, okay, so what are your expenses? And they're like, they have to give $250 for their rent and to repay their passport fees. Which
passport fee
every month, and then they have to send home like $150 to their family, and then that means they get $50 as like spending money.
Wow,
right? And they and I was saying to them like, you, there's no such thing as a passport fee. And they're just looking at me, and I'm like, just gently trying to explain to them that this is all a scam, And
how do they take it?
They're in shock because a few hours earlier they were at a karaoke bar. Now they're all in a shelter wearing like the same pajamas and basically they don't know what's going on. And so and also I'm trying to explain to them that they're being victimized, and they're just like, I'm not a victim. No. I
that's like basic gaslight to the maximum, right?
And they're like,
no, like they're aware that they are a victim.
Exactly. I'm like, they're not. And they're like, I'm not being forced to do this. I'm like, okay, so, when you were at the karaoke bar, could you just walk out and go home? They're like, no. I'm like, so what do you mean you're not being forced? Do your parents know what you're doing? And they're like, yeah, they know that I'm in Malaysia working. And I'm like, okay, so would you tell them that you're sitting here now? That you were at a karaoke bar and you got raided by the police? And they said, no. I'm like, why not? And they're like, we don't want them to know because then they'd worry. Right. And so it's a psychological thing that you have to navigate. You have to understand the culture of how, not just about how Vietnamese people think, but people from the Mekong Delta and also women and girls, this whole gender issue as well. Because they also don't want to bring shame to the family. Yeah. Right. And it's all of that is very, very difficult for them to wrap their heads around. And that's one of the reasons why they not refusing to view themselves as victims. Number one is that they may not understand that they're victims. And number two, it almost is like a defense mechanism.
Yeah. Would be one of your most memorable story about, helping or interviewing with those human trafficking victims?
There's so many. I'll give you two. One positive and one negative, but both of them are still kind of things I think about from time to time about possibilities. the first one is a young woman who is Thai. And she was a very good student, and she was trafficked when she was about 16 years old, sold as a wife into China, and sold to this family for their son, and forced to quote unquote marry him. Gave birth to a daughter, and as soon as she gave birth, the mother-in-law took the daughter and then sent her to work in a coat factory.
Wow.
So she was trafficked for sex and labor.
Yeah.
So it's always the value of a woman is
Sex.
much higher as a product than that of a man, right? But as members of society, we're like, much less valued. She decided basically one day, she's like, I will die trying to get back to Vietnam or just get back to Vietnam. But she's like, I cannot stay here because if I die, nobody will bury me. Nobody will do any of those things.
Yeah.
And so she spent the next year learning how to speak Mandarin and learning and taking money wherever she could and all that stuff. And then it came one day, pretending to be like the obedient wife and all that. And then came one day that she went back to the house on a break, and the house was empty. They finally left her alone. The problem was that the mother-in-law had taken the daughter away. So this young woman had to decide in that moment to escape and leave her daughter behind or stay, basically stay forever. So she was like, she literally had a window, an open window, and she jumped out the window. So if you can imagine at age of like 17, having to make that decision, it's
like giving up your child,
being trafficked, tricked, sold, raped, giving birth,
and
then
hard labor,
and then abandoning your child.
Wow.
Right. 17 and a half. Not only that, she rescued the next door neighbor who was ethnic minority Vietnamese, similar situation. So like, let's go. Managed to get themselves to a police station, and then spoke Mandarin, and then explained who they were, and then got themselves back to Vietnam, where they both eventually ended up at the shelter that Pacific Links runs on the Lao Cai shelter, or on the Lao Cai border. So I met her about 2 weeks after she came into the shelter, and I asked her, just like I ask every survivor who comes in, "Oh, Am, what's your dream? What do you want to do? And she said, "I want to be a doctor."
Wow.
And I was like, okay, that's quite ambitious. Number one, because ethnic minority. Number two, she's been away for so long, at least I think it was like 2 years, and without schooling. So I was like, okay, well, we'll see. I'm like nurse. I'm hoping nurse. So fast forward 3 years, she graduated top of her class in chemistry, physics, and biology. She was chosen as one of the top 25 math students in Lao Cai. And she ended up starting, is in school, 4-year university down here in Saigon. And she's been provisionally accepted into medical school already. Oh. She is an amazing, bright young woman. And I'm so extremely proud of her, because this whole journey has been difficult.
Yeah.
Because so many times along the way, she was like, "Oh, I'm scared to take the entrance exam. I'm afraid I'm not as smart as my classmates. They're worried about the test, and if they're worried about the test, what chance do I have?" And then I said to her, I was like, "Am, you have been through so much more than your classmates ever have. Like this test is the worst thing in their lives that they've ever encountered. This is a piece of cake for you, and you got this. This is you're much stronger than this." And so, and her reason why she wants to be a doctor is, it's not just about giving back, but for her, she's like, this is my way of healing, not just myself, but also being able to heal other people and heal Vietnamese society and heal all the hurts and the pain that's going on. Which I thought was so wonderful, because she's so, she harbors no ill will towards anybody. For her, she's quite, stoic is not the answer. It's not the right word. She's very,
woke.
No, she's just very hopeful about things, and she doesn't hold grudges.
Yeah.
And
even going through all that, but she doesn't hold grudges.
No. And she And for her, it's very much just about looking at, okay, what are the positives that I have in my life? And one thing that was interesting is that when she got accepted into university, there's a little mini crisis because her mother, who's, ethnic minority and didn't go to school, et cetera, was like, okay, now that you've gone to school, you've got your high school degree, that's enough. Why don't you go to China and di manhang di?
Oh no!
Because
again,
she heard that I heard that you could earn 8 million Vietnam dong a month. Di banhang, go sell stuff.
Like online selling?
Who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows?
Okay.
Right? Yeah. It's always that whatever. Someone said. And it was this thing where again it was like how does she rebel against her mother?
Yeah.
It was a big issue. I was in Hanoi at the time and I called her and I was like, do I need to get on the bus and go to Lao Cai or wherever and talk to your mother and explain to her? I'm like, I was like, if I find out you were in China, I will go there myself. I will take you back. I'm like, we have invested way too much time and opportunity in you. I'm just like, I can't, like my heart cannot take this.
Yeah.
And she was like, don't worry. I'm not going to listen to my mom. I just need to explain to her all that stuff. Fast forward a year, I had lunch with her after her first year of university. She's doing amazing. She was a top 3 student in her class. So she got a little mini scholarship. I asked her, what is she excited about for the next semester? And she said, she's so excited for anatomy class because she can't wait to start working with dead bodies. And her favorite piece of clothing is her white lab coat. And I was like, well, how are your parents now? And she's like, oh my gosh, my parents are so proud. And anytime a neighbor walks by, they always bring out our certificates and like show them, very typical, right?
Yes.
And not only that, her younger brother was so inspired by her that he decided not to go to work after finishing high school, but to go to junior college.
Junior
college.
So
he's now in
Yeah.
And her grandmother cries every time she talks to her because she said, no one in our family ever finished school, and now I have two children who are in college.
Wow.
And so
the first generation going to university.
And just like that, it's changed everything, and not only that, thanks to, this lovely Vietnamese parent thing of Hoa, the whole community knows what it's like or what the benefits are when you decide to keep your daughter in school, when you decide to treat her equally to your son. It's better for everyone.
But the family, when she came back, they all aware of she being trafficked and still asking her to go to China.
Because
it's all about economical reasons.
It's not just the economy, it's about survival.
And
remember, you're dealing with very, very poor people. These are like among the poorest people in Vietnam.
Yeah.
They do not have the luxury of thinking about next year. They are thinking about, how do I put food on the table
today,
maybe next week, if they're lucky.
Yeah.
And also they have not had the benefit of a long education and critical thinking and all the stuff that we have. And so I'm not so harsh on parents who make bad decisions regarding their children in these cases, just because you have to empathize with them. You have to put yourself in their shoes and understand that what kind of decision would I make if I lacked the education, the knowledge, if I was constantly on survival mode. It's difficult, right?
Yes.
So it's difficult to truly, harshly judge someone unless you have been in that position.
Yeah, absolutely true.
But the point now is that, the parents are like, they're like, yes, my daughter's in school. I'm so proud of her, which is that's the change, the incremental change that we have to push forward every single community in Vietnam in order to alleviate or solve this issue of gender inequity. It has to start from these communities.
Yeah. And from there, you will also see victims where they are willing to coming back and also is not ashamed or not ashamed of not going because I'm trying to sacrifice for my family. And now it's like, I know what's best for me.
Exactly.
I can choose what is my best.
Exactly.
And I can always support my family along with it.
Exactly. And the support for the family also means that the status of the girl rises in the family and also in society. You know, we're a very practical people, right?
Yeah.
So when you, in good ways and bad ways, you can put a value to anything. And so the traditional kind of Confucius way of looking at things is, oh, girls are less valuable than boys because they don't bring as much value to the family as boys do. They get married, they leave, we have to pay a dowry. We're actually at a loss, right? We're
Sure.
It's a losing proposition to have a daughter.
Yeah.
Whereas with the son, he brings the girl to the family, he works, he has to take care, you know, so you benefit below.
Yeah.
In reality, you know that's not true.
Yeah, and then like the girls, even the girls, they still have responsible to, you should marry a rich man so you can bring back money for your family. So it's not really going away.
And, you know, everybody knows that you still, even if you're a girl, you know, a daughter, you still send money back home to your family. You still take care of your parents. That there's no gender split with that anymore. It's just this is that lack of critical thinking. You just accept things because that's the way things have been for thousands of years. And without actually reflecting on, is this actually reality or not?
Yeah.
And so if you are a female who now is able to earn an income and be able to send money back home, that means that your family is dependent on you. Yeah. That means that your power, your status rises in the family and in society because you are actually someone who's contributing to the family and to society.
Yeah.
That's how we measure things here. And so understanding that, the way to kind of not just increase the gender equity or balance between male and female, but also work to reduce the outflow of women and girls into China and Malaysia and Cambodia, is to raise their value as members of society so that it's higher than their value as a product on the market.
Yeah.
And I can tell you right now, our value as a Vietnamese female as a product on the market is not very high. It's terrible.
Yeah.
It's, you know, for
it's basically a birthing machine or labor.
But an actual monetary value.
Yeah.
Right? So the way that trafficking works in China is that you are sold multiple times.
Yeah.
So you have your initial, the initial guy or the initial trafficker who takes you to the border, hands you over.
Yeah.
That's the first point of sale. And then the agents on the other side take you to a middleman, you know, and they sell you again, and then you get finally the end buyer, the retail buyer, the family that buys you for good.
Yeah.
So that initial Vietnam to China price, that first price, can you guess what it is?
I'm not sure. It's like
it's a market price. So it fluctuates. It goes up and down. You know
how much? Like I'm guessing like 20 million. So $1,000.
1 million Vietnam dong.
Wow.
Per
person.
And this is like a healthy 16-year-old, you know, Vietnamese female. And that means that our value as members of society is cheaper than that.
Sorry, I was just laughing at Pham for his reaction.
It's less than $50. Five girls, 5 million.
Wow.
You know?
Dang. 1 million is like,
Are you worth more than 1 million Vietnam dong?
Well, I made more than that. You know, I know how much I'm worth.
But that
means that if I got sold, then I will be worth it from there, or maybe less, because
or maybe more, because then you have to also there's variables, right? So
depend on the market, depend on the buyer.
Exactly. Just like any product.
How about market organs? Like, do human trafficking in Vietnam also contributing to like black market human?
There's organ trafficking into China. It's much smaller than the bride.
But does that values more than people?
Yeah, for sure. And then the women and girls, sometimes after they give birth, they'll be resold to another family.
Yeah.
Or sold to a factory or a rock quarry or whatever. So it's the value continues on.
Yeah.
Right. But so in terms of prevention and also betterment of society, how do you increase the value of a woman and girl, a Vietnamese woman and girl in society? A couple weeks ago, the UNFPA just released a study. It was published by the Vietnamese newspapers. And their estimate is that every year Vietnam Vietnamese people abort about 41,000 female fetuses. And that's because of the gender bias against girls in this country.
Oh, okay. So abortions, but mostly just females.
All female.
All females. Oh,
because boys are more valuable than girls.
Yeah.
And so that means that the gender birth disparity in Vietnam is for every 100 girls, it's about 111 boys, which is now putting us up at top 3 in the world alongside China and India, which have always been the top 2 countries in the world.
Yeah.
That has major implications for Vietnam in terms of demographics, economics, society, everything. Because look at what happened to China. 40 years of this one-child policy, 40 years of preference of boy babies over girl babies created what? A dearth in marriageable females.
Yeah.
So then what happened?
And then they import more females.
Started importing. So what do you think is going to happen in like 25 years when you have young men of marriageable age in Vietnam, and we just don't have the supply of women because they were aborted or adopted out or sold to China, Cambodia, Malaysia? What do you think is going to happen?
We're going to import from other
countries. So we will
countries.
become a trafficking destination. And it's a big problem.
Yeah.
And it's not something that we can't understand. Literally, all we have to do is look at what's happening in China to see what could happen here if we don't start tackling this issue now. And we don't
even have the one-child policy.
No.
And that's,
But I mean, one of the good things is that the Vietnamese government has created like a 5-year plan on gender equity, and one of the issues that they have identified is this gender birth disparity. However, it's going to take a lot of work. It's long work. It's this long-term investment because you are going up against thousands of years of Confucius belief. This is bred into East Asian belief and culture.
Yeah.
And it's very, very, very difficult to dislodge that. But we have to. There's no other way.
Where do you think we could start? From having more female figures that are being more successful in the community, and then would be that in like a representative or an image to, influence the society to see that we need
not just
values are equal.
Not just having female representation. We need to start talking about this openly. Having open, constant discussions about the value of women and girls in Vietnam. This is what is one of the biggest, for me, such an interesting paradox, because I was raised by my very, very, very old school traditional, Northern parents to believe that Vietnamese women are like the strongest, smartest, best people in the world.
Yeah.
And my parents are very old. My mother's originally from Hanoi. My father's from Taiping. They're in their 80s. They're Bắc Nam Thu, like old. So they're very, very traditional. But for them, their pride is not about gender. It's about our culture. It's about our history. It's about everything. And so growing up, it didn't matter if you were the son or the daughter. Your responsibility, your bon fun, was to bring honor to the family.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's how we grew up, is like, oh, Vietnamese women are the best. Everything that's good about you is because you're a Vietnamese female. So that's my mindset. That's always been my mindset. And then I come back to Vietnam, and then you have all these wonderful stories about, Hai Ba Chung and all that stuff. And then there's a stereotype that, oh, Vietnamese women are the strongest, the hardest working. And then you have the gender birth disparity. You have the issue of trafficking. You have the treatment of women in the workplace. You have, you see
it's so
all
much
of the
contradictions.
So much contradiction.
Yeah.
And it's something that we view, we acknowledge, we see, but but a very, very serious discussion about how do we start righting this, imbalance. From the village level, from the education system, from the workplace, all of that needs to be discussed openly. And right now it's just very piecemeal and it's very like high level.
Yeah.
Bringing on women leaders, all that's great. But how does, be having this woman CEO affect, ethnic minority girls who are expected to drop out of school at age 14 and get married?
Yeah.
You know, these are the issues that we need to talk about.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's actually to look at the root causes and try and, solve the problem from there.
Yeah.
It's not about hiding things. Hiding things does absolutely nothing because you cannot hide this, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so, I always tell people, oh, but it's so embarrassing. I'm like, what is embarrassing is that we actually are known for this. And we cannot bury our heads in the sand, because it's not just about the image, but it's actually hurting the country, hurting our culture, hurting our people.
How about the second story?
So the second story is kind of the story to me that just talks about, it's just so representative of this dehumanization. So we had one young woman, trafficking survivor. She was unusual because she wasn't ethnic minority. She wasn't Lizantap. She was Mekong. And
Kin is the majority.
The majority, majority
ethnic in Vietnam.
Yes, and she was sold into China, tricked and sold into China for prostitution. She was, I think, 17 years old at the time. Sold to a brothel, and it was run by just a bunch of gangsters. And she tried to escape quite a few times. She was there for just over a year and a half, I think. And when I met her, when she first came in, you notice on her arm, she's got these 6 dots, like 2 rows of 3, just equal distance. It looks almost like a tattoo. It's so dark.
2 rows of 3.
Yeah. So like 6 dots total.
Yeah.
Like, the top of a Lego. That's what it looked like. And
is that a sign from a criminal organization? Or?
Yeah. And she also had like tattoos on her hand. So what happened was, she tried to escape a few times. First time she tried to escape, they caught her again, and then they tattooed their insignia on her so that, all the girls, if they try to escape, so it's like branding them like they're cows or pigs, right?
Yeah.
Do you know who your owner is? The second time she tried to escape, they captured her again, and her punishment was that every day the guards would put their cigarettes out on her arm. So that's why she has those 6 dots, because they're scars from cigarette butts being put out on her arm every day for a year and a half. And then her last escape attempt, actually all the women and girls in the brothel tried to escape. So they were caught, and as punishment, the gangsters killed one of the girls.
Wow.
And then made the rest of them sleep with the body that evening in a locked, dark room.
That's horrible.
So she's recounting this, and she's talking about how, how she can smell the blood, and they couldn't see anything. So the girls were just like piling on top of each other because they were afraid that the blood would leak out to them and stuff. Yeah. And it was very difficult because, you look at someone like that who has so much trauma, and there's only so much you can do. Especially with the little resources that we had in the shelter, and also within greater society where there is not an emphasis or the right resources for this kind of trauma counseling. Like going to see a psychiatrist or a counselor. Mental health is not a
mental health is another issue.
Exactly, not just in Vietnam, but Asian culture, right? And so that was a really, really difficult case because trying to help her, she was treated like less than human.
Yeah. And
so one of the things that we tried to do to help her was to literally erase her scars. So I'd gotten a beauty center in Hanoi to donate laser treatment to get rid of the tattoos and the scars on her arm.
Yeah.
Because at least with that, she could go out into society without being stared at or without being thought of as like a gangster or whatever, or bad girl.
Yeah.
And then we tried to put her into, vocational training school and help her get some semblance of a normal life back. But she ended up going to the training school, but she only went to a couple of the sessions, the laser training, because even looking at the scars on her arm and trying to get them removed was too much for her because she had so much trauma. And that's one of the times where you feel really helpless because you don't know what else you can do because we're so limited by resources and just the availability of programs and people to help her through this trauma, which is going to affect her for the rest of her life.
Yeah.
And it's, I think about her from time to time and, just wonder how she's doing.
Mm-hmm.
She
like
went
how
back,
long does she's involved with the program?
she stayed with us for a few months and then transferred to a vocational training school back in her home province.
I see.
And then after that, I lost touch with her.
I see.
So, I hope she's okay.
Mm-hmm.
But there's that trauma of being treated as less than human, as a slave, as subhuman.
Like product.
Is I don't we were it was very hard to figure out how to help her long term.
Yeah.
Because that long term, years of therapy and all that is just not available here.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And all this is just like a great conversation. It's a very educating, eye-opening sessions for me. Thank you. But yeah, I would want to know more like how do you, get involved with this initially? Because this is a very heavy topic and it's also something, in Vietnam it's not very like popular. People know, like, for example, we know here and there's kidnap, there's like slave or human trafficking, but really we never talk about it and there's no like direct conversations about it.
Yeah.
Because I think also it's because, if people are being trafficked out overseas and they are sending back the monies. So Vietnam is still very appreciate the money coming in. So they don't really see the issues of, people getting sent out or being victims.
Or exploited or
anything.
It's not about the topic per se. It's more about first, this is my career. Development, international development is my career. I chose this career. I have my degrees are in it. This is something I went into eyes wide open. And for me, I'm attracted to this career because for a number of reasons. Number one is I think it's just really fascinating. Looking at how a country like Vietnam moves from, post-war, war-torn country into something that could be, is right now an emerging market and moving forward beyond that. And also having the ability to play some sort of role in helping usher the country and the people into this, a better life, a better future. That to me is really interesting. I love the intersectionality of it, how, Vietnam is growing fast, but we still face all these issues, whether it's environmental or social or economic, and working with different partners. But for the topic itself, I think it goes back to number one, the way I was raised. My father, when I was finishing graduate school, was the one who was like, okay, you need to go to Vietnam. Not even go back to Vietnam. I had never been to Vietnam before. But he was very much the one who was like, you have, had all these benefits. You've gone to school and now it's your duty to go back and help rebuild Vietnam and bring glory to Vietnam. It's all about honor and glory.
Yes.
So he's one who was pushing. And I, at the time, wanted to go to Northern Africa. So anywhere in French-speaking Africa. I was looking at Algeria, Tunisia, Cameroon, Senegal. Because back then that was like for development professional, that's where you want to go.
Yeah.
So I was like, fine, I'll just send out my CV and whoever hires me first, that's where I'll go. And I ended up getting the job at East Meets West first. So that was my foray into Vietnam and why. And I've been asked this before, like why I continue to work in these difficult topics. And it's, so I was raised Buddhist. Very culturally Buddhist, but I wasn't really kind of mindful about the mindfulness aspect of Buddhism until about 20 years ago when I was living in New York and I read for the first time The Art of Happiness by the Dalai Lama.
Yeah.
Which is, the concept is very, very simple. It's about perspective. Your purpose in life should be being happy, but what is happiness? And it's, when we look in the Western world, especially, we are constantly looking at what we don't have and what we lack.
And trying to improve on it.
Yeah. And saying, oh, I will only be happy until I have the new iPhone or I will not be happy unless I get the iPhone, get married, get the job, get the this,
get a house.
There's always qualifications to happiness, and you can't be happy until you have that. Whereas the idea is that we have so much joy in our lives that we don't acknowledge, and how we also ease our own suffering is by understanding that there's so many others who are suffering more than us, and that interaction with people who are suffering more and the work to alleviate their suffering gives me perspective that, actually my life is not that bad. I have it pretty good.
Yeah.
So it's not, I'm like, I really don't need to complain about anything.
Yeah.
Anything. And so understand, and so all of that, having the education and the upbringing and the kind of the, Vietnamese child responsibility fun of having to help build up Vietnam, and, according to my parents. And then also this idea of, what makes me happy. This is what makes me happy. I enjoy doing this work. I enjoy my life. And that it's not just about encountering those who are suffering more than me, but also taking all of my privilege, all of my assets, all of my resources and my knowledge, and trying to reduce suffering is what makes me happy. So it's not like a sacrifice thing. It's not a he-sing thing. It's not, I have this obligation. If this did not make me happy, you would not find me sitting here doing this. I'm very, very open about that. Like I would not do this. I'm not a martyr. But it's really about finding what makes you happy, and passionate and keeps you going. And so this, the work about, especially with trafficking, is interesting because it's forced me also to reflect a lot on my thoughts, my judgments, my life, and how I behave towards others, and also like the energy that I put out and how I treat others and also myself. Because when you encounter such trauma on a regular basis, it does affect you. Yeah. And so you can't just hide things. You can't just run away from things and just say, oh, it's okay. But you really have to understand, okay, hearing these stories over and over again and working with trafficking victims over and over again, it does do a number on you. And so how do I need to take care of myself and my own?
Do you feel like you need to detach your emotions out of your work?
It's not about detachment. It's more about, while I'm working with them, yes, I can't like break down crying or whatever in front of them, because you do have to be strong. Yeah. But, understanding afterwards, okay, I need to take a break. I need to do other things that bring joy into my life. I need to allow the emotions to come and not suppress them and all that stuff, because then you end up, it's like putting
resentment
and becoming jaded and cynical, and that leads to burnout. And I don't want to be burnt out. I want to still continue doing the work that I love and not get sick and tired of it. So that's and it's one of those things where you see and it's not also about we have to help them, these poor people. It's like I'm coming at it from a completely different way, and especially with the women and girls, again, the way I was raised to believe that, according to my parents, the Vietnamese women are the best and the strongest and the whatever, most in the world. That is who we're supposed to be. And so working with, these trafficking survivors is not about helping these poor souls, but making sure that they get the access to the education or the job opportunities or the self-confidence or motivation to help them fulfill their kind of like destiny as like, strong Vietnamese women. Yes. Right? Yeah. Which overall then strengthens the country.
Yeah, absolutely. So. And I think overall when women are feeling, if you have respect for yourself, then you can start to acknowledge how other people respect you. And then you can tell, like going back from like, how do you agree, disagree to your parents without disrespecting them? But that what's best for you.
Exactly.
And this all coming from self-respect. So I think one last question is, as me or the audience who want to somehow contributing or helping into this issues, then how do we do our part?
So there's a couple of things. Number one, from a more practical standpoint, understanding what the root causes are. You don't have to just, contribute to an anti-trafficking NGO, because there are many, many NGOs and NPOs, nonprofit organizations, non-governmental organizations in Vietnam that are doing actual anti-trafficking work without realizing that they're doing it. So, for example, scholarship organizations are contributing to trafficking prevention by keeping vulnerable students in schools, especially the girls.
Wow.
So supporting that. I'm actually on my own just trying to encourage these NPOs and NGOs to acknowledge and understand the impact of their work. It's not just, we keep kids in school so they can earn a living afterwards, but understanding the greater impact of their work on these other societal issues that are harming Vietnam's future. You can also work with environmental organizations that are providing economic empowerment for vulnerable families in the Mekong Delta. The reason why is Mekong Delta is, lots of environmental issues, from plastic to water to climate change, salination.
Yeah.
Big issues.
Yeah.
And the effect of all that is that families who've traditionally been agriculture families in the Mekong Delta have lost their livelihoods. So now they're forced to migrate.
Yeah.
They're forced to leave and in search of other work. And oftentimes that means the daughter has to drop out of school. When she drops out of school, it's because she goes to look for work. When she looks for work, she goes to Cambodia or Malaysia or China, and then she gets trafficked.
I see.
So all of this, it's this intersectionality, all of this combines. And, so any organization that's working with gender inequity, gender empowerment, economic empowerment, climate change mitigation, all of that, preferably, they're doing multiple programs or working with other NGOs or NPOs. Those are all organizations that we can support, because the net impact of that is that it helps reduce the push factors, or it helps mitigate the push factors for trafficking.
I see.
And then also being aware of it and talking about it openly. This should not be a hidden, embarrassing topic.
Yeah, it should be a shameful thing that, this is the fact of Vietnam.
I told you, what's shameful for me is when I go to Europe and I meet with high-ranking government officials from like Ministry of Interior, Ministry of Police, Ministry of Home Affairs, whatever, and they're saying, "Oh yes, this is what Vietnamese people are known for." That's embarrassing.
Yeah.
The fact that it exists is not embarrassing.
Yes.
And the way that we need to deal with it is to talk openly about it, and also not try and hide it under the rug or sweep it under the rug, but actually, support organizations or programs that are trying to prevent it from happening.
Yeah. And I think your work currently in Vietnam is absolutely great, and you have created just great effect, and of course for too many lives that you've been talking to, or you helping them to understand what their situations in general. I think that's great. And for people that want to reach out to you to find more about your work or want to collaborate or work with you on this matter, then how do they reach you?
We're on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn.
Can you spell it out, your LinkedIn handle?
I don't actually know my LinkedIn. It's like a bunch of numbers.
We'll add it later.
Okay, you can add it later. The usual channels.
Yeah.
LinkedIn, Facebook.
Mimi Vu.
Yep. And
Mimi Vu at Raise Partners.
Yep. Emails mimi.vu@raise.partners. And
partners with an S.
Partners with an S.
Yeah.
Yes. And so that's how you can reach me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for this very eye-opening conversations right now. For the audience, if you like this episode, you want to learn more, make sure to reach out to Mimi. Also, let us know what you think about the episode, and and go check out our Facebook, Instagram, and let us know what you think about this episode. All the social media handles and emails are at Vietnam Rising Podcasts. And the emails at gmail.com. And thank you for listening to this episode, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.